Hey, this is Shaun with the Atlanta Tennis Podcast, powered by GoTennis. Today, we are with Dr. Patrick Cohn of Peak Performance Sports for mental training for peak performance in the athlete, or at least the competitor, not always an athlete, as I have recently learned. So, today's topic, Dr. Cohn, is what do you actually do during mental training? It sounds kind of like an obvious question. But what do we actually do? Maybe a way to ask this is, can you walk us through the process a bit?
Absolutely. So we have a specific system when we're working with our athletes, Sean. We start with a couple of assessments. One is a quantitative assessment to find out where the athlete is on their mental game skills. And then another one is more related to, we call it open-ended questionnaire. It's our own questionnaire called our TMAP assessment for tennis players, our AMAP assessment for athletes. And once we get that information from the athlete, now we have a good understanding of where their challenges lie and some of the things that we might do in the mental coaching sessions with the athlete. Once we get that back, we set up a summary, what's called an AMAP summary, and then we sit down and do what's called the discovery session with the athlete, which means we just want to ask some more questions about the responses on the AMAP itself. Once we're there, then we start to get into the actual nuts and bolts of the coaching of the mental skills.
So it sounds technical. That comes across as kind of difficult to follow maybe for some. So can I simplify it and just say you get to know the athlete, you get to know this competitor as well as possible? How far back do you go? How much do you really need to know? What does that entail?
Everything we can. I mean, if we can talk to a coach or we can talk to a parent, that's part of it. If we can get statistics from the athlete, that's part of it. If we can get video, competition video, that's also part of it. And we're asking them, obviously, about their most recent season, most recent competitions. We're not going way back with them, but we do like to see some of the statistics and some of the match video if they have it.
So you're really going to get to know what I've done in the past, because almost as in from a coaching point of view, we would create, the tennis coach specifically would create this periodization plan where we would schedule everything out. And within that would be some of this mental training. Where does this fit in to where we say, okay, you've looked at now my last year of either results, video, maybe what the plan was, where I didn't get. And then you're going to say, okay, mental training needs to fit in here and it can help how?
Yeah, it just gives us a more complete picture of what's going on with the athlete. Maybe we find out that when they're leading a match, they tend to blow up. They tend to protect or blow up. We call it a comfort zone. And maybe we want to focus particularly on that. Or we discover that they have very fragile confidence. Or we see in the video, they get frustrated super easily with misses. So those are some of the things that we like to look for. And that all of that gives us clues from the parent, from the coach, from the video, any statistics they might have they want to share. All of that gives us clues on to where we need to emphasize in terms of the mental game.
And the video and kind of that backstory allows you to understand me better in spite of what I'm necessarily going to tell you. So it's more of the proof of how I actually am. If I put myself in that player standpoint where I say, no, I probably only need to worry about this, everything else is fine. You can look at some of that history and say, well, Shaun, maybe not. Maybe there's more.
Well, I think where you're going with that, Sean, is self-report, self-assessment.
Yeah, probably.
Is not always accurate.
Yes. Yeah.
And having external sources really helps. Getting information from either coaches or parents or video is really helpful. I had one time a parent contact me, and this is with a tennis player. I was working with a junior tennis player a few years ago, and she said, "It doesn't look like he's trying. It looks like he's just, giving up out there." And I said, well, let me see some match video. They sent over some match video, and what it appeared to me was that he got very, very frustrated with his game, was dwelling on previous points, and that looked like he was giving up. He wasn't trying hard. And so what parents sometimes see on the outside, the behavior of the athlete, isn't necessarily what's going on the inside with the athlete.
So what I show, I don't always wear everything on my sleeve, so to speak. So how I'm acting isn't necessarily directly indicative to what I'm feeling.
No, what I'm saying is what parents see is not indicative of what's going on with the athlete.
Okay.
So sometimes they'll report something that isn't accurate, but we can see in the video what's more accurate and through the self-report of the athlete. So in my line of work, it's all self-report, and self-report, self-assessment, self-evaluation is sometimes open to, interpretation, certainly.
And in that case, you're going to get information from the coach, from the parent, from previous video. Obviously, you'll need to talk to the player. But in this case, I would guess you would need really a full buy-in from the player. Do you ever have that? Maybe this is a little into the weeds on what do you actually do, but how would it work? Do you ever have that player that kind of doesn't want to be there? Like they've been told they have to go do this, but they're not necessarily interested?
Well, no, we try not to get into that situation. We do a 15-minute assessment live with the player to make sure that they have both feet in, right? So we try not to have that situation. Sometimes on very few occasions it does happen where a coach or a parent feels like the athlete needs it, but they don't have 2 feet in yet.
And in that case, you say no to that player and say, I can't help you until they're.
We give them other resources and we say, let's try this, a workbook or an ebook or something. Let's try this first and get your athlete on board. And then parents or players might come back to us in, 6 months' time, which is fine. Sometimes they're not ready for it.
Yeah, because I could guess, and every coach has experienced that, the coach where the player's being forced to be there. We see that a lot at the beginner level because the parent says, well, why don't you go try tennis? Do I have to? And that it may be a similar thing where you get good and the parent says, you need to get your mental act together and this is the direction we want to go. It's got to be difficult sometimes to talk some of those players into it.
Very touchy subject because parents will approach us and say, how do I introduce this to them?
Okay.
Because what I'm really telling them is you have a bad mental game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? If you need a mental coach. But that's not necessarily the case. But that's the way parents feel that their athletes are going to take it, that, oh, this is just another thing I have to do outside, off the court. And sometimes they'll take offense to it with the fact that, well, what am I supposed to be doing in these mental coaching sessions? Like, am I mentally weak in some way? So, and we don't look at it that way. You and I have talked about that. Really, mental training is like physical training. It can help the athlete improve their performance, regardless of how many challenges you have.
In that case, you're not saying there's something wrong with you. You're not saying, sorry, there's something wrong with me or the player. This isn't a therapy session where you've got some trauma you've got to deal with necessarily. This is one of the major piers of the game. Pillars. There we go. One of the major pillars of the game. If we've got the physical, the technical, the strategic, the mental is always there. And in this case, this is simply the next step in the mental improvement where it's not, there's something wrong with me. It's just everyone can be better at everything.
Yes. I have a saying, Shaun, and that is once all your training is complete, in other words, you go and you lace on your shoes to go on the match court. Once all the training is complete, your mental game takes over.
I like it. I like that a lot because it's a good way to point out, and similar to other conversations we have with other coaches and the physical trainers as well that say the same thing. You got to trust in what you've worked on up until this point. Your technical is what it is. Your
Correct.
physical is what it is. And we look up and say, can you now mentally handle it? Now's when you put this bit into practice and there's actually something to do. It's not in the middle of a match. You're going to be able to take a deep breath and fix your forehand technically. But you could take a deep breath and wash it out mentally and get yourself turned around.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. Yeah, it's once all the physical skills are done, they're in place. It is what it is that day. You got to make the best use of those physical skills, and that's where the mental game comes in. If you go out there and you're tight and you're short stroking it, you're steering and guiding, and you can't hit your serve because you're too tight, then that's obviously where the mental game comes in.
So in that case, what I just heard is I can fix my forehand halfway through the match, but I do it here.
Well, we don't like the term fix
Okay.
because that implies a really quick fix.
Okay.
You can't fix a forehand. What you can do is you can improve your ability to swing out on the ball and swing more freely and not as, tight and short stroking it. So we like incremental improvements in the mental game, just like you do in the physical game, right? There's no quick fixes.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a set or a set and a half later that maybe if I can take that mental game, I think what I'm trying to picture is maybe I can improve my production physically, mentally. I can mentally have that change. I'm not going to, in the middle of my match, figure out how to get fitter or figure out, oh, okay, there's a technical change I need to make. That's unlikely.
Right.
But mentally, I can turn the dial a little or flip a switch. And that's where we see that sometimes somebody's down a set and a break and they kind of go into whatever mode and they start swinging out. And it actually, you make a shot or two and then the whole moment, everything changes because you just kind of let go.
Yes. And tactics can certainly change on a dime. That's something that can change on a dime. But you have to have the composure to say, okay, what's working, what's not working, and change it up.
And so back to the original question is, what do you do to convince me? And I'm sure there are lots of things and you can't just explain it in a couple of minutes, but how can you convince me if I say, okay, there's one thing that you can give me that says, okay, here's what Dr. Cohn does with any player, generically, of course, right? That says, you know what, I can help you in this space. This is one of the things we work on. And we work on this thing that says, you know what, when you're down or even when you're up, whichever direction you want to go with it, I'm sure you've got plenty of them. But in this case, it's that point of view that says, all right, I need you to right now, you've already laced up, you're on the court, the mental game and the tactical game are what matter right now. You've got your tactics. Mentally, what do you do with those players to prepare them for that time frame?
Excellent. So we teach players mental skills to have stable self-confidence, to focus on the process and not the outcome, to let go of mistakes, to perform well when up in a match, and to grind it out when down in a match. Those are, that would be kind of my elevator pitch for what is it that we do with tennis players.
And so you do that, which kind of to me sounds like magic, because that sounds like something that everybody needs. Everybody wants those abilities, but it's got to be super difficult to actually get them installed.
Yeah, once again, there's no quick fix. You can't, just flip the switch. Our approach with players is we coach them over a long period of time. We do one mental skill per session, and we often work with them for months. Sometimes they'll come to us just for a month of sessions weekly, but we're actually trying to teach them, let's improve just a little bit, just get a little bit better with your focus out there and where you put your focus, for example. We're not asking for miracles. We're not asking you to be Djokovic out there.
It sounds like a miracle. That's what I'm saying. This sounds like magic that everybody says, I just can't. And maybe that's it. Maybe we go take our tennis lesson once a week and we go to our team practice once a week and we play a match once a week and we say, why am I such a head case? Well, I don't hear I'm working on my mental skills once a week. I just never hear that.
Right. Well, we have resources for that. We have Tennis Confidence 2.0 audio and workbook, and we work with adult tennis players, probably 3.5 and above, and certainly we work with juniors and professionals as well, one-on-one with our mental coaching. So we guide them through the process if that's what they want.
There we go. Maybe that's it. Tennis Confidence 2.0. Was there a Tennis Confidence 1.0?
Yeah.
Or do you just start at 2.0 and say you start here?
No, this is our revised
3.0?
program. Revised program, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's probably the thing that says, okay, maybe if I can, like my Duolingo, I work on my Spanish for a few minutes a day. Maybe that's what we need. We need mental training. We need a little app that gamifies mental training that says, all right, it's 30-40. You're hitting your second serve. What's your thought process here? And it'd be very interesting to say, okay, how can I work on this daily? If not once a week, like we do everything else, but to add mental training into that, at least your weekly thought process. Put it in there somewhere, because we work on the technical in our tennis lessons. We work on the tactical with our group practices. And then we have our match play, and we come out and go, but I'm mentally terrible. Well, I'm pretty sure it's not in your practice routine.
There's nothing more frustrating than going out there and just blowing a match because you knew it was all your mental game. You tightened up or you choked or you got frustrated. And then when you get off, you realize, what did I do to myself?
Yeah, that is probably the frustration to say, I should have been able to win this match, if only. And usually that's not if only I was a better tennis player. I've said that before. Sometimes I lose matches. I'm just not good enough to beat that guy.
Yeah.
Other times it's, you know what? I need to get my Tennis Confidence 2.0 and get to work. Dr. Cohen, I appreciate it. We'll see you again next week. Mental training for peak performance. Thanks so much, Doc.
Thanks, Shaun.